I grew up having a lot of weird conditions about me and a lot of things that I thought were just like, oh, it's unique. I'm like just a little quirky girly. But it actually turned out to be Ehlers danlos syndrome and autism and some of the other comorbidities. I grew up, even as a kid, having to go to the a hand specialist who helped me with my handwriting because I was just constantly in pain when I was writing. And it turns out that is because of the hypermobility of my fingers. So, like, this motion happens whenever I write, and my hands go like this. And then I also have this swan neck where you can bend only this top part of your finger, and as well as this. And that actually just is linked to hypermobility, and it can also cause issues with your fingers breaking easily, which happened to me. I've broken all of my fingers at least once, and that was just sort of like a normal part of my childhood. I was always able to just like pop my shoulders, my knees, my hips in and out. And I sort of used that as a party trick. As I did physical therapy to stabilize those joints, I'm not able to do this anymore unless I try. Although sometimes, just like on bad days or weeks, they do pop in and out. But it's definitely to much less extent than it was when I was a kid. I also got a concussion and I was never able to return to baseline. So I stayed out of school for like 4 to 5 months, and then had to go back part time. Um, and I was always having headaches after that. Like every single day was a headache. Um, and I mean, a lot of people in my family did have migraines, but things like trauma can cause, like physical trauma can cause a lot of the muscular issues and can cause like chronic migraines after injury. I also just kind of had like weird shaped arms. So, like, if I raise my arm, this is what it looks like. I'm not going to do it too long because I do pass out when I raise my arms above my head. Um, but everyone in my family had those elbows. And, like, as a kid, I was able to lick my elbow, which is something, like, normal people cannot do. I think I could probably do it if I tried, but again, I would have to pop my shoulders in and out, and I've sort of moved away from doing that. I kind of always had a high heart rate, but it did get like significantly worse after I had my concussion and when I had a car accident on the highway. And my resting heart rate like never sort of went back down, and now it's at like 120 beats per minute. And this also means that if I exercise, I get like extremely out of breath and I feel dizzy and it's hard to breathe. And I do have asthma, but an inhaler in those situations does not really help. And even if I stretched for like 30 minutes to an hour before I did any sort of like exercise, like especially when I was playing soccer as a kid, I would pull my muscles like constantly, no matter how much I stretched. And my muscles are always like incredibly tight. And it turns out that is because they are the only things really holding my bones in place. Um, so without that, it could cause a lot of issues. And I do get Botox for my migraines, but I sort of only do it in the head and back of the head, not in my neck or my shoulders, because this has sort of led it to me not being able to keep my shoulder joints in place and stabilize my neck. I've always had like chronic GI issues, whether that just be like stomach pain or like constipation. And that's sort of linked to my fructose malabsorption, which I think tends to come with autism as well as Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. So anything that has gluten, sugar, and that's like a lot of fruits, too much fiber, and there's just like a lot of other categories and things like beans and stuff. Like I can't digest those properly, and it causes a lot of pain as well as like constipation. And with that muscle tightness, I do definitely get like the coat hanger pain where it like centralizes here. And it does go all the way down my back as well. And some physical therapists have told me that that is again just linked to having to stabilize my neck, but also I have a degenerating disc in my neck, as well as a bulging, I think it's called a fascia. I might have that wrong. Never mind, it's bulging facets. My joints also like grind and pop when I move, and I can like feel them rubbing up against each other. And that definitely got worse with age. And there have also been studies that show that growing pain as you're aging from a child to an adult is not a normal thing. But a lot of the times it sort of points out these other conditions that you can have. And people have just like over time sort of called that a normal part of childhood. And especially like everyone in my family really has these conditions, so it was a normal part of my childhood. Like it was normal in my family. People were saying like, oh yeah, it's normal to be in pain all the time. And things like my periods and stuff were like the most, and they still are, but to a lesser extent, the most excruciating pains. I would pass out, I would bleed an incredible amount. And it was just like the most agonizing experience, especially earlier in my childhood when I got it. I definitely have like soft skin, like incredibly soft, and it's a little bit stretchy, but it's not as stretchy as like the classic type of ehlers danlos syndrome. I have the hypermobile type. I also had just like scoliosis, and it's sort of like it hasn't gone away. My back is kind of, if you've ever seen like an inbred fish, that is what my spine looks like. It bends in the opposite way as it's supposed to be, and it causes a lot of issues. I also just had like incredibly easy bruising. It got worse as I got older. Although when I did get a concussion, like I did not bruise on my face, and I tend to not bruise on my face, but like my peripheries, I definitely get like a ton of bruises and very easy, and like I'll find them and I don't know what they're from. I'm also just extremely clumsy and like I move very awkwardly. And that's sort of linked to the hypermobility, but also I have a condition called dyskinesia, where my muscles will sort of just like randomly twitch and move. And when I was a kid, I had like restless leg syndrome. Like when I was trying to sleep, my legs would twitch nonstop and it would hurt if I was trying to stop those motions. And I also just get like random twitches of my hands and sometimes my head and my feet. And I guess I just sort of looked on my physical therapy notes from a session and it was marked down and I was like, oh, cute. And then I Googled it and I was like, that actually makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and I've sort of figured out some tricks that help make it so doctors believe you more. I might talk about that a little bit more in a different video, but just quickly, like, I found it really helped to have female doctors. And when I made appointments, I also made sure to let them know either I have these conditions, like when I was diagnosed, or I would say, like, doctors have mentioned and suspect these conditions. And I found it really helps to go in having done your research. I'm a scientist, so it's a little bit easier, but I always read publications on the symptoms that I experience and how they're linked to my overarching medical conditions and all the comorbidities.